Hello, my name is Jenny Goncalves, and today I'll be presenting ethical decision making. Chantal is a 16-year-old female who identifies as lesbian and has been presented to me by her mother, Peter. Peter is paying for Chantal's therapy and has threatened to stop paying if details of the therapy sessions are not disclosed to her. Chantal is desperate to continue therapy, however isn't ready for Peter to know about her sexuality. Chantal asked me to lie to Peter about what is being discussed in therapy so that the session can continue. In this case, Chantal is asking me to be dishonest with Peter. As a therapist, I usually try to work with my client's wishes wherever possible. However, if I do so in this instance, then I'll be placing myself in a compromising position. When faced with a potential ethical issue, it is important to adopt a well-reasoned decision-making process. I will therefore be using Kuchar and Keys-Spiegel's 8-step ethical decision-making model to help guide my decision. According to this model, Step 1 requires me to determine if the case truly involved ethics. Ethical dilemmas involve conflicts and having to choose between equally desirable or undesirable alternatives. If I choose to lie to Peter, then I will be compromising my integrity and engaging in disreputable conduct. It is important for me not to consider lying as an option, as this would violate the third overarching principle of the Code of Ethics, integrity. Alternatively, if I choose to tell Peter the truth about the session, then I will be breaking confidentiality. It is therefore equally important for me not to consider this option, as confidentiality falls under the first ethical principle, respect for the rights and dignity of people and peoples. Further, this course of action may also negatively affect the therapeutic relationship, and Chantal may ultimately not trust in the therapy process again. Under the general principle of propriety, this would not be in the best interest of Chantal. Finally, if I choose to say nothing, then Peter will stop paying for the sessions and Chantal would not have access to therapy. This could potentially do more harm than good, which again goes against the general principle of propriety. It is thus evident that I am now faced with having to choose between undesirable alternatives, each with the potential to violate different principles within the Code of Ethics. In Step 2, I'm consulting with the guidelines and reviewing relevant literature in an attempt to reach a resolution. I've considered ethical theories to explore my issue further. The utilitarianism theory argues that the right moral action is the one that benefits the most number of people. Under this theory, lying would seem most appropriate, as I would be appeasing both Chantal and her mother. In contrast, the deontological theory argues that, however good a consequence may be, the action may be morally forbidden. This theory would therefore consider lying to be the inappropriate course of action, as it is morally wrong. In considering whether to tell Peter the truth about the session, it would be beneficial to refer to the ethical guidelines. Peter is a third-party payer and believes she has the right to know the details from the session. However, according to the confidentiality section of the ethical guidelines for working with young people, Chantal's consent is required for any disclosure of information to her accompanying parent. Similarly, the informed consent section of the ethical guidelines of confidentiality also recommends obtaining Chantal's consent prior to disclosing any information to Peter. The ethical guidelines for working with young people further recommend making proper financial arrangements that are clearly understood by all parties and safeguard the best interests of all. If the arrangements were clearly understood and agreed to by Peter, then perhaps I may have avoided the issue altogether. Step 3 of the model is to consider all factors that may influence my decision-making. Factors such as biases, personality traits, and personal needs all have the potential to play a role in decision-making. My own personality traits, for instance, may affect how I come to a decision. I am an honest person and prefer to be truthful in my dealing. However, I'm also not one to disappoint or let people down. It is therefore not surprising that I'm currently conflicted. My personal needs, particularly around financials, are another factor that may influence how I go about my decision-making. This is something that I need to be aware of, as basing my decision on monetary gain could also result in ramifications, both ethically and professionally. For the next step, I would consult with a trusted colleague. This step is to ensure that my decision isn't influenced wholly by my own perceptions and values. Peer consultation is also a useful way of drawing on others' experience. I would seek out a colleague that has experience in dealing with a similar scenario, which could assist me in promptly reaching a resolution. In Step 5, I need to evaluate the rights, responsibility, and vulnerabilities of all affected parties. Chantal's vulnerability as a young person places extra emphasis on this step. I have the responsibility to act in Chantal's best interest. However, I also have the responsibility to act with integrity towards the profession. If I choose to lie, then I would not be consistent with integrity. If I choose to tell the truth, then I will be breaking confidentiality. As a therapist, I need to ensure that my actions remain within Chantel's right to confidentiality. My responsibility as a psychologist is to ensure that Peter is fully informed and understands Chantel's confidentiality rights. This would have ideally occurred prior to the commencement of her daughter's therapy sessions. And in failing to do this properly, I have now placed myself and Chantel in a vulnerable position. Generating alternative decisions fall under step 6 of the model. In this step, I would consult with Chantel and suggest options that differ to lying. My initial suggestion would be to disclose very general information from the session that would not reveal too much to Peter or place Chantel in an uncomfortable position. I would discuss with Chantel the different topics we had gone over in therapy, and she could decide on what she felt most comfortable to have disclosed. I would also propose to Chantel that when she is feeling ready to discuss her sexuality with Peter, that we could do this in a therapy session. This may be positive for Chantel in the long term, as research has indicated that parental support mitigates risk to children identifying as homosexual. By establishing the mentioned options, I have reached an alternative that may not be considered most attractive for Chantel, however could be the best and most feasible choice. At step 7, I need to determine the probable consequences of my decision. If I were to see through my alternative decision of disclosing general information, then I could be setting a precedent, and Peter may expect to have more information disclosed to her when asking me. Contrastingly, if I were to provide very general and vague information, then Peter may assume that I'm not being completely honest with her, or that therapy isn't really working for Chantel, and may seize the sessions regardless. If the sessions continue up until the point where Chantel is ready to discuss her sexuality with Peter, then I would also need to be prepared for Peter's reaction, and also keep in mind that Chantel's welfare could be placed at risk afterward due to Peter's strong conservative beliefs. The final step in the 8-step decision process is making the decision. The model combined with the guidelines has helped guide my decision thus far. This process has shown me that the 3 original options, that is, lying, telling the truth, and not doing anything at all, are not viable options due to potential ethics breach. Therefore, the alternative course of action is necessary. It must be noted, however, that not every morally correct decision will protect each person involved from some form of potential harm. This would be particularly true in the instance where Chantel is ready to discuss her sexuality with Peter. Once the decision to tell Peter has been implemented, then I would need to support both Peter and Chantel in the process. Now that I've reached a decision, I want to be reassured that this decision is the right one. Sadler's 3 test is a theoretical approach that can help confirm this. This approach proposes 3 questions that will determine if my selected course of action is most appropriate. The first question, is the action fair? Asks if I would treat others the same in this situation. The answer is yes. When making a decision, I would typically consult with my clients first to ensure that I'm not crossing any boundaries with my proposed action. This practice also helps strengthen the therapeutic alliance. The second question, how would you feel if your decision was known by others or came to the attention of the public, reaffirms that I've made the right decision. I'm confident that my course of action would not be morally conflicting for most. By choosing not to lie, I've stayed true to my values as well as the profession. By suggesting an alternative, I've put forth a more ethically acceptable solution. The third question, would you recommend this course of action to appear in a similar situation, is yet to be determined. This would only be clear once I have implemented the chosen course of action. Upon reflection, I should have been clearer with Peter from the outset. I've learnt the importance of discussing confidentiality, especially when there is a third-party payer and a young person involved. In future, I will need to ensure that all parties are fully informed and aware of the confidentiality terms and have agreed to them prior to commencing therapy. I've also learnt the importance of consulting with experienced colleagues. In future, I will try to consult with a colleague who is more experienced in dealing with gay, lesbian, and bisexual clients. This is to ensure that my non-heterosexual client is receiving the best possible treatment in line with his or her needs, and also to ensure that I'm properly equipped to assist with the coming out process. There is often no right answer when it comes to ethical decision making. What may be an appropriate course of action for one client may not be appropriate for another. Therefore, utilising a model-based approach in conjunction with the guideline has assisted me in reaching an appropriate course of action for Chantel. I was able to remain within ethical boundaries by referring to the guideline and was able to reach an alternative decision by using Cooch and Keith-Spiegel's 8-step process. I was also able to justify my course of action by comparing it against Stadler's 3 test. If I find myself faced with an ethical dilemma in future practice, then I can be confident that this method can assist my decision-making and lead me down the most ethically appropriate course of action. Thank you.